Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another episode in the series Dawah IlaAllah, as we look at how to use comparative studies to be more effective in calling people to Islam. And in the last two episodes, we have been starting our study into the Jehovah Witnesses. You know, those guys that you see on every street corner, or perhaps have met on a Sunday morning, coming to your house, knocking on the door, asking, can they tell you a little bit more about Jehovah? And we've been looking at some of the doctrines they believed in. We looked at the doctrine of how they see Jesus Christ, what they understand about Shaitan or Satan, and what they understand about the angels. And this week we will continue to look at the life after death beliefs of the Jehovah Witnesses. Jehovah Witnesses have an interesting understanding of the hereafter, or specifically what happens at death. Jehovah Witnesses believe that death is a state of non-existence with no consciousness. That when you die, you will not be conscious, that there is no hell or fiery torment, there is no Hades, there is no place called Sheol, as it says in Hebrew. They understand that the idea of death and torment is something that is totally foreign to them, and that the term for hell is simply the grave. So when somebody goes to hell, it simply is the place that you are buried. It's a grave. There's no eternal burning and suffering and torment and Hades and Sheol forever and ever and ever. Jehovah's Witnesses consider the soul to be a life or living body that can die. So they believe that just like this physical body, the soul can die. Just like we can be injured or shot and it can cease to be. The Watchtower Society, in their publications, teaches that humanity is in a sinful state, and that the way for us to be redeemed, to be released from this sinful state, is to accept what Jesus did, and that He shed His blood for a sacrifice or a ransom or an atonement for the sins of mankind. The interesting problem, or the interesting question that one has to ask himself when looking at this doctrine is, why would I want to believe then, if when I could live as bad a life as I like, I can do all the terrible haram things that I want to do? Because when I die, I'm not going to go to hell, I'm not going to suffer, I am just going to cease to be. And that seems like a pretty good deal for any human being. I mean, there's no consequences for anything. So it seems like a pretty much of a very poorly thought through doctrine. Witnesses believe that there will be a little flock or a little congregation that will go to heaven, but that the hope of life after death for the majority of the rest of humanity, what they call the other sheep, involves being resurrected by God to a cleaned earth after Armageddon. But they believe that it's only going to be a very, very few people. In fact, it is believed only 144,000 people will ever go to heaven. The rest of humanity will come and live on the same earth that they were on before. And this will happen after Armageddon. So the idea of the interpretation of all this comes from the book of Revelation, the favorite book for most cults. Cults meaning those groups that are outside of the mainstream Christianity, being Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons, Scientologists, and Seventh-day Adventists. So in Revelations chapter 14, verse 1 to 5, it means that they have this idea that the Christians going to heaven will be limited to exactly 144,000 people who will rule with Jesus as king and priests over earth. So these people will become members of the council of Jesus or the archangel Michael or Michael, and that the Jehovah's Witnesses teach that the only ones that will be with him ruling in paradise will be this specific 144,000. The rest of them will be part of this new earth. Paradise will be here on planet Earth. And during Jesus's or Christ's or whatever they call it, during Christ's reign, it's called a millennium reign. Most people who die prior to Armageddon will be resurrected and will live forever on this new earth that has been created. and that at the end of a millennium, at an end of 1,000 years, well, things are going to change. What will actually happen? Will the souls die? Will they be given a human life again? Will the earth be created again? What will have happened in that 1,000 years? Will people learn to sin again like Adam and Eve according to the Old Testament? What will happen during that 1,000 years reign is anybody's guess. There are many, many different versions and interpretations that the Jehovah's Witness has come up with. What will happen during that millennium, 1,000 years of this new earth and new creation? And it seems like a bit of an odd thing to do, to resurrect everyone and give them these new bodies for 1,000 years, and then what happens? They all die again. So it's not a very well thought theology. Now, the Watchtower Society, in their publication, it teaches that God's kingdom is a literal government, just like we have governments on earth, but in heaven, ruled by Jesus and the 144,000 Christians drawn from planet Earth. And that the kingdom is viewed as a means by which God will accomplish His original purpose for the earth, transforming it into a paradise without sicknesses, without death, and without the suffering that we witness on earth today. And it is said to have been a focal point of the entire mission of Jesus when He came to planet Earth. So this is their interpretation of what will happen. They believe that the kingdom that was established in heaven in 1914, that the Jehovah's Witnesses believe took place, serves as a representative of the kingdom that will be established on earth after the Battle of Armageddon. What is the Battle of Armageddon? This is when the world will fight against and kill and destroy, and eventually the demons and Satan will be overthrown and vanquished. And then there will be a new earth created on the same earth. And this will be the millennium period where the kingdom of heaven will become the kingdom of earth. How this will take place, there's a lot of rewriting that has taken place over the years between the Jehovah's Witnesses about something coming down from heaven, a whole kingdom, like a whole political power. Some interpretations say no, the ruling will take place from heaven, and it'll govern those people on earth. There will be no meeting of the two places. Very vague. This is all dealt with in eschatology. Eschatology is, like the word insinuates, escalation of events, or what will happen at the end times. There's a study within theology called eschatology, which is the study of what will happen in the end time prophecies. So it's very popular as well in most of the cults within Christianity to study eschatology. You'll find very few of the other Christian denominations even bother with eschatology. So the central teachings of the Jehovah's Witnesses is that the current world era, or the system of things as they are at the moment, is entering into the last days. And that in 1914, that this era began. This is the beginning of the end. And so they believe, or was their belief, it may have changed in the last weeks, that those people who were born in 1914 will not die. There will still be some of those people who were born in 1914 that will be alive when Armageddon takes place. So if we start to do the mathematics, according to the theology, and whether this is still the theology of the day, we don't know, because it may have changed since last week. If we minus 1914 from the current period of time now, most of those people will be over 100 years old already. So unless it happens in the next few months, it is highly likely that their prophecy will come true yet again. So we find that the whole idea that they have given about Babylon the Great, this earth that has now gone all wrong and gone haywire, that the present age that we live in, the destructions, the natural disasters, AIDS, all these other epidemics are because Shaitan has, or Satan, or Lucifer, whatever they want to call him, has been released on earth, and he's doing all he can to destroy mankind and distract him from coming to know Jehovah. And so they consider all the present day religions that are on planet earth, whether they be Christian or not, as false and identify them as the Babylon the Great. They refer to them as Babylon the Great, or the harlot that is found in Revelations chapter 17. And they believe that they will soon be destroyed and that all these nations will be removed from planet Earth, and that there will be peace on planet Earth again. And that the beasts that are found in the book of Revelations in chapter 17 are this present age that we're living in, the present political system. And this is one of the reasons why they refuse to do military service. It's one of the reasons why they refuse to be part of the political equation, why they refuse to vote, why they refuse to help in any military battles, because they believe that they will only simply be helping Satan in his battle against Jehovah. So that's why they don't vote in any elections. They have nothing to do with any political systems. They won't get involved in politics. They won't get involved in elections or anything like that. And they won't even help in defending their country if it is required from them. So this is where that comes from. There's a reason why they do that, and that's the main reason. After Armageddon, they believe after this big battle takes place and there's a big fight, and God will then enter his heavenly kingdom to include earth. Earth will also become part of this heavenly kingdom, and it will be transformed into a paradise, this earth. Very similar to the Garden of Eden as described in the book of Genesis. We'll continue looking at some of the ideas of Armageddon and what will happen after we get back from this break, inshallah.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الله لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم لا تأخذه سنة ولا نوم.
A light from Allah in the darkness.
له ما في السماوات وما في الأرض من ذا الذي يشفع عنده إلا بإذنه.
A guide from Allah in the confusion.
يعلم ما بين أيديهم وما خلفهم ولا يحيطون بشيء من علمه إلا بما شاء.
A cure from Allah for every sickness.
وسع كرسيه السماوات والأرض ولا يئوده حفظهما وهو العلي العظيم.
The Quran. Join me, Muhammad Timham, as we study the beautiful passages of the Quran and the great lessons that they contain in Lessons from the Quran.
Study about the glorious lessons that connect us to our Creator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in Lessons from the Quran. Next on Peace TV.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. After Armageddon, most of those who had died before God's intervention will eventually be resurrected during Judgment Day, lasting, and they will live for about 1,000 years. What did they do about the resurrection of Jesus, peace be upon him? At the end of the 1,000 years, a final test will take place when Satan is released to mislead perfect mankind again. So during this 1,000 years, people will be given the opportunity to live in perfect harmony, according to Jehovah's Witnesses. And then after 1,000 years, Satan, who has been chained for 1,000 years, will be released to tempt mankind all over again. And the end result will be the full testing of humankind. Why this has to happen is anybody's guess. Christ will then hand all authority that he has had over the last 1,000 years, Jesus or the archangel, he will hand all his authority back to God after this 1,000 year period. Now, Watchtower Society publications, in one of their publications, teach that Jesus Christ began to rule in heaven as king of God's kingdom in October 1914, and that Satan was subsequently outcasted and sent out from heaven to earth, resulting in the chaos that we see on planet Earth today. So what Satan and all the demons were still doing in heaven up until 1914 is again anybody's guess. Now, they believe that Jesus rules invisibly from heaven and that he is secretly ruling over the whole planet. He's never going to actually come back to earth. There's not going to be a real physical reappearance of the Prophet Isa, peace be upon him, on planet Earth again. They believe Jesus' presence began with his inauguration when he was crowned as king in heaven in 1914 and ends when he comes to bring final judgment again on humans on earth. So he remains king from 1914 only until when he comes back again. And so this is some of the odd and strange beliefs that Jehovah's Witnesses have regarding Armageddon, or what will happen on that final day. Now, Jehovah's Witnesses go to services or worship or pray or submit to Jehovah not in a mosque, not in a temple, not in a church. They have something which they refer to as the Kingdom Hall. Now, the Kingdom Hall is just a fancy name for a church. It's still a church. No matter how many times they say that it's not a church, it's still a building where people go to and they do Bible studies, pray together, or do whatever they do together. So meetings for worship and studies are held in the Kingdom Hall. That's what they refer to them, Kingdom Hall of Jehovah's Witnesses. You'll normally see that sign, which is a typical building with very simplistic design. Normally it looks like just a meeting place, and it has no religious symbols. It hasn't got the normal things like crosses and crucifixes and flames of fire and all sorts of other things that you'll not find in other Christian churches. So it's normally a very, very plain thing. They basically believe that this meeting hall is something that they need to do, attend once a week, a weekly service. These meetings are scheduled together at these halls. Sometimes they will have congregational meetings with elders. The elder is somebody who representative in their area, that they'll meet at maybe their home or meet at a public place, and then they will do studies together. So the meetings are largely devoted to studying of what the Watchtower magazine and the Watchtower Society literature preaches. It also means sometimes that they may be referring to the Bible, but most of the time they are studying the literature that was reprinted by the Watchtower Society. And the format of the meeting is established by the religious headquarters of the Jehovah's Witnesses, which is in the USA. And the subject matter in most of the meetings are decided upon so that the entire Jehovah's Witness community worldwide is doing the same thing on the same day at the same time. So they're not at a different page. So if everybody's in the world is on page 2, even those that are in China and Brazil and Mexico are all on page 2. So it's very, very well structured. Prior to 2009, congregations met 3 times each week. And these meetings were later changed. These worship meetings, as far as I'm aware, still take place, where these will be what they call family worship meetings. And during these family worship meetings, they will gather and maybe sing some hymns, maybe they'll do some readings, maybe they'll read from some of the literature, and they will do some brief prayers that they will make. And then each witness that is gathered together will give an account of what he's been doing, who he spoke to, how many people he gave magazines to, how many people he's witnessing with, how many families he's staying with. Basically a report back to encourage some of the other brothers and sisters. So they have a very well-structured organization. So they have report backs, they have subcommittee meetings, they have committee meetings. They have every 30 days or every few months, they will report back to a central body and tell people what has actually taken place, what they've been doing. Several of the circuits or several of these meetings meet once a year for 3 days. They have a convention. Many of these conventions you'll see will fill up an entire football stadium. So they have these conventions. During this time, they will have an event that will take place, which is like the Lord's evening meal, maybe like the Last Supper. But they call it the Lord's evening meal, where they celebrate the Jewish Passover, or the time of the Jewish Passover. And they are offered the communion. Obviously, only those people who are one of the 144,000 are permitted to take part in this communion, not the general populace, unless the doctrines have changed since the last time I checked. But from this time that we did this, those doctrines were the same. Jehovah's Witnesses are probably the most well-known for their house-to-house recalling, for their visitations to people's homes. And this they call evangelizing, or evangelism, evangeli, giving the message. And so this includes giving out the watchtower, it includes giving out booklets, other publications that they have written. And most of the literature today that they have has been written in more than 500 different languages. And so the witnesses give these publications. They have field workers that go out. These field workers, once they have done this work, gone and given out studies, they must report back, and they give what they call a field service report. And in this field service report, they give like a war strategy, tell them where they went, who they spoke to, what the responses were, what the need is. And so they normally will make sure that follow up, maybe if they weren't able to answer their questions, that one of the elders or somebody else who's more qualified will go there and give more work with the people, do more work with the people. So they're very, very good with evangelical work. What are their value systems? What is the values of the Jehovah's Witnesses? What are their ethics? Well, their views of morality are very conservative. They are not like other Christians which wear these very short dresses and tops that are revealing like the girls. They're quite conservative in their address. They do not accept same-sex relationships, same-sex marriages. They do not accept abortion. They consider abortion to be murder. They believe in modest dressing. They believe that gambling is forbidden. They shouldn't gamble. They believe that illegal drugs is not acceptable, that drinking of alcohol in excess is wrong. Tobacco use is totally forbidden. However, we need to go back one step and talk about the alcohol issue. They do not say that you're not allowed to drink alcohol. You are permitted to drink alcohol, just not to drink alcohol over the limits. In other words, they say you must drink in moderation. Again, my question is, what is your moderation? If I have a person who is an alcoholic and I ask him, what is your version of moderation? It's going to be very, very different to somebody who just drank on a Sunday meal, a glass of wine. His moderation is going to be very different to an alcoholic. So what does that mean? It's very, very vague. So it's very important to understand that Jehovah's Witnesses do not partake in most of the things that we as Muslims don't partake in. However, they are allowed to drink alcohol. There's nothing really that says anything about pork that I have found in any of their literature. So they're still able to do that. They have a patriarchal society. In other words, their man is the head of the family. They're not embarrassed by that. They're not apologetic by it. The man is the king. He rules. And that's just the way it is. The husband is considered the authority on the family issues and every decision-making issue. So the wives are told to be submissive to the husband, and that whatever he says or whatever he teaches is truth. So marriages are required to be monogamous. There's no plural marriages. They can only have one husband or one wife, and that it needs to be legally registered. Strange that they want it to be legally registered when they don't accept any government and they don't want to vote and they don't want to serve in the military, but they want to have the legal protection of marriage in case they get divorced so that they can get the money, alimony, whatever it is. So it's very odd that when it suits you, you can live under the government system. Well, we are running out of time. Time is almost up again for today. Jehovah's Witnesses, quite a complicated bunch. The thing is to understand how they see things and how they interpret things so that it makes your dawah more effective. Remember that we don't have much in common with them. So don't only look at the things that we have in common. Just because they don't gamble doesn't mean we have things in common with them. Just because they don't believe that Jesus is God doesn't mean we have anything common with them. They have very strange beliefs. Well, this is all the time we have for today's program, so make sure you join us again next week, same place, same time, and we'll continue looking at Jehovah's Witnesses. So from me, Areeb, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.